Are you tired of taking your equipment to the repair shop every time you want to use it? Well, watch this video and I promise you I'm going to save you a ton of money. Hey y'all, thanks for tuning back into Chicanic. I hope everybody's having a great week. Today we are going over a super simple trick that is going to save you a ton of money, but nobody ever thinks about it. But before we get into today's video, if you're a fan of saving time, money, and frustration while fixing your own small engine equipment while watching in-depth tutorials, you've come to the right place because that's what I do. I upload a couple times a week, and if that sounds interesting, hit that like button, smash that subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, and please leave a comment. I love to read through the comments, and I will reply to all the early commenters. By this time of the year, there is lots of equipment that you're not using anymore. I'm not using my string trimmer. I've already cut my wood, so I don't need some of my chainsaws anymore. I don't need my pole saw to cut down any limbs. I don't need my hedge trimmers right now, so I have tons of equipment that I'm probably not going to pick up again for months. Now, I know there are a ton of you out there watching this video that did one of two things when you got done using your equipment this year. You either set it in your garage full of gas and forgot about it, or you tried to run it until you ran out of fuel. Both of those are wrong. Now, we all know if you chose the first option there and just let it sit in the garage, gasoline doesn't last over 60 days anymore. It doesn't matter what kind of fuel stabilizers you put in it. I don't know what they're doing to our gasoline, but they do not want it to last. And after about 60 days, it'll still run in a car or an ATV or something like that. But when it comes to these 2 cycles, they're finicky and they do not want to run on it. So if you left gas sitting in it, it's going to make your carburetor gummy. You like my mechanical terms there. It's going to, gook up your fuel filter. It's going to deteriorate your lines. These carburetors have tiny little ports going through them, and any kind of buildup like that is going to make it not run correctly. And then there's the other half of you who thought you were doing the right thing by running the unit completely out of gasoline and letting it sit dry, as you think, but you can never get all that gasoline out of the carburetor or the remnants off of the fuel lines. And what happens? It still deteriorates everything. Let me show you. Now this was a carburetor that was ran dry, and we're going to open it up and see what it looks like inside. So you can see here, can you hear that sound? That is hard, okay? Not as a rock, but definitely crispy. That is not good at all. Look. That's what run dry does. Because this is the most important gasket. This is your metering diaphragm, which actually regulates the fuel going through your carburetor. That one's hard, but yeah, this one is definitely not good. Let me show you what it's supposed to be like. Got a brand new one here. And see how that is? This is super flimsy. It's got to be like that to regulate the fuel correctly. So although this carburetor is extremely clean, it looks beautiful inside. This is a great candidate to have a carburetor kit put in. It will never run correctly with this metering diaphragm because it's either going to be pooched inward to where it's constantly pushing down on the needle lever, letting way too much fuel come through, or it's never going to push down like it was in that position and no fuel will ever come through. So this definitely has to be changed. Now, the problem with that, though, is 90% of the shops do not put carburetor kits in these small 2-cycle carburetors anymore. They just replace the entire carburetor. So usually when you're looking at $40 to $50 labor plus a $50 carburetor, you're already at $100. But that doesn't include the fuel filter they're going to change if they're putting a carburetor on, or the spark plug that they're going to change, or the fuel supply that they're going to charge you. So it's going to end up being a lot more than $100. Now, I know I'm going to get a ton of people that say I do this every single year and my stuff starts right back up, and it is true. 50% of the time, it will start back up because even if this is a drastic hardening, but even if it's a little hard, usually the gasoline and oil mix that you put in there will start to rejuvenate this diaphragm back up. This one is way too far gone, but other ones that are not this bad, it will start to loosen up. That's why I tell a lot of people at the beginning of the season, Do not stop trying to start your machine. If it'll pop off at all and just act like it wants to start, keep trying, because a lot of times that's your problem right there. It's your metering diaphragm. And if you can work it back out, you can get going again. But I want you to know this 5-minute trick that will save you a ton of time, money, and frustration in the future, and definitely keep you out of the repair shop. But also, while I have this carburetor apart, I want to try something out. Mechanic in a bottle. Is it myth or magic? So I'm going to throw this carburetor back together real quick, and then we're going to put some Mechanic in a bottle in it. And I have used Mechanic in the bottle over the years to rejuvenate. Like, I've had some needles from machines that you couldn't get the needle anymore, and so I would rejuvenate the rubber tip by putting it in some Mechanic on the bottle, and it would work a lot. So I'm not going to say that, you know, this stuff is complete BS, but I'm going to put it to the test with this extremely hard metering diaphragm. So I have a new bottle here, if I can get it open, and I have this little setup that I like to do whenever I used to try to use Mechanic in the bottle. The problem is at the shop, we just would put a kit in it. It was much faster than waiting 4 hours for this to work. So I have a primer bulb with an in and an out, suck and a blow, and I'm going to stick one part of the fuel line, because you can reuse mechanical bottles supposedly, as long as you don't have any chunks of stuff in there, and this carburetor was really clean. So I'm going to stick this in there, and I'm going to suck the Mechanic in the bottle through here so it goes into the carburetor, and then it'll come through my primer bulb and go back into my tank. So I'm just gonna stick that like that. And we got a good flow going there. So right now it is full inside of Mechanic in the bottle. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a few more pumps, get it flowing through there. And I'm gonna let it sit, see what happens. So I learned this trick just by accident from customers bringing in their chainsaws that they either had found sitting around the house that was their dad's who had passed away or something like that. They would bring in these like 30-year-old to 40-year-old chainsaws. And when they'd come in, they were completely full of oil in the gas tank. You could tell it went through the carburetor. Their bar oil tank was still full of oil. The entire thing was completely oily. And to my shock, these 30-year-old chainsaws would still have pliable fuel lines, and the fuel filter would still be okay, and the diaphragms in the carburetor were still like brand new. All I did was clean the oil out, put in some fresh fuel, and they would start after sitting for 10 years. So here's what you're gonna do, guys. You're gonna pour your gas back into your gas tank, and preferably use it in some other 2-cycle. Because like I said, it's not gonna last over 60 to 90 days. You're gonna wanna buy a bottle of oil. Now, if you mix 1 gallon at a time, get a 1 gallon size. If you mix 2 gallons at a time, get 2 gallons, but make sure you know which one that you put in your unit, because you're gonna pour the whole bottle inside of your machine, because you're gonna be able to use it later in the gas that you mix for next spring. Once you got your oil in there, you're gonna look down, make sure that your fuel filter is sitting inside of the oil, and you're just gonna prime it. Prime it a whole bunch until you know that that primer bulb is full of oil and not gasoline. Before you're done, if you don't have that much oil inside of it, go ahead and turn everything around, get that oil layered all over the outside of your fuel line too. Now this is how you store for like 6 to 8 months. If you're gonna store for years, you're gonna wanna fill the fuel tank completely up with oil. But since we're only storing this over the winter, I only put a 1 gallon mix in it. That way I can pour it back out and make a fresh gallon of fuel when I go to use it this spring. I'm gonna make sure to prime it all out of the carburetor as I'm pouring it out of the machine. And then once I have my fresh batch of fuel, I'm gonna pour some inside. I'm gonna prime the dickens out of it to make sure that it's not all still stuck in the carburetor. I'm gonna make sure that it flushes through my fuel filter really well. And then I'm gonna go to try to start it. Now, two things are going to happen at this point. Your carburetor is going to be fine, your fuel tank's going to be fine, but you might foul out a plug with that extra oil that you primed through it. So it's just one thing to be aware of, that if it's still not starting, you might check your plug because it could be flooded out or fouled. The other thing, it's going to smoke when you first start it up. That is nothing to be worried about. The smoking is just burning off that extra oil, and once that's gone, you're good to go. Now, what if you don't have a primer bulb? Just like the old timers back with their 30-year-old chainsaws, they didn't have a primer bulb, so how were they able to get the oil through everything? They pulled on them a lot, because every time you pull on your chainsaw, it works an impulse from your engine to your carburetor that actually makes your metering diaphragm move up and down to let the gas come in, and that's what they did. They just kept pulling on it until that oil finally got in there. And when you go to restart it at the beginning of the season and you've got your fresh fuel in there and you're trying to flush it all out, you're going to have to pull a bunch, but you'll get it through. A couple more things you can try is a really nice oil. Like, I use Red Armor, and I can let my stuff sit for 8 to 10 months, go back, and it starts every single time. I'm not an Echo dealer, so I'm not pushing it just because of that. I just know it's tried and true. It must have some kind of oils in it to keep your diaphragms pliable and your fuel line still in good shape. And last but not least, I gotta give credit where credit's due. I've said a lot of stuff about TruFuel, and I have many reasons why you should not run it. I will leave a link to a video right up above if you want to see that. But I had hundreds of units come in to the shop that would not run on this stuff, but all I had to do was empty their TruFuel out, put my fuel in, and they ran every time. So even though I don't recommend running TruFuel in your machine, it's great for storage. All right, I have let this sit for the 4 hours it recommends. Every once in a while, I would come through and give it a few more primes. Let's see if it did anything to this metering diaphragm. All right, I'm gonna bring this one out of it, because this is my return line. That way I can put it all back into the bottle. And I'm really interested to see this because, although, like I said, I never really used it for carburetors like this just because I would throw a kit in it. It was much faster for me. I am interested to see if it did anything. Now, this was an extreme case of a hard diaphragm there. I don't know if anything could help it, but I just want to see what it does. It did nothing. That will never work. Like I said, it's either going to be giving too much gas the whole time or no gas. So it's a myth. I mean, it says it fixes ethanol issues. I mean, that is definitely an ethanol issue. Didn't fix it. So guys, thanks again for tuning in to Chicanic. If you find yourself coming back over and over again to my videos, consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps out the algorithm and it will make my videos shown to a bunch more people to save them time, money, and frustration in the future. If you haven't found me at Facebook, find me at facebook.com/Chicanic. Find me on Instagram at TheRealChicanic, or find me at Chicanic.com, where you get your own t-shirts, hoodies, and long sleeve shirts. Thanks guys, and have a great day.